Snowy peaks and open skies, northern winds whisper goodbyes. Dreams take root where the maples grow, a land of promise where rivers flow. Welcome to the north, where the light shines so bright, chasing every dream beneath the stars tonight. Every step you take, a journey to belong, building futures here where hearts grow strong. Lakes like mirrors, reflecting pride, from the Rockies to the ocean tide. Voices mingle in a tapestry.
Okay, here we go, guys. We're here. How's it going? Sorry, we're a little bit late today getting started here. How are you doing, Alicia?
Doing well, Mark. The sun is shining. Feels like spring.
It sure is. I'm going to try to we got lots of stuff going on here. Oh, I guess that is my camera backed up there. Yes, we are. No shortage of work going on these days. That's for sure, Alicia. And like we've talked about quite a bit recently, the work is quite emotionally draining. And, we care about you guys. We care about your futures. We care about what you're going through. And when we have consultations with you and, and there's challenges and we're not always able to solve those challenges, it affects us. And never before in my practice have I had so many difficult consultations with people who have done their very best, done everything right. And it just does not look like they're going to be able to stay. Or other individuals who they've made just the smallest little mistake that could have been avoided. And now the consequences of those mistakes are quite astronomical. So I don't know if you're experiencing the same thing, Alicia, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, it's tough. And I mean, we say it's tough for us, but it's so much tougher for the people who are on the other end, because I've had a few consults recently where there was weeping involved, right? Like people are just so upset to realize, and sometimes they don't realize the immigration impact of a choice they made. And sometimes it's a small mistake, or sometimes it is a big mistake, and they know they made a big mistake, but they don't know what the legal consequence of that mistake is. And so that's where, when we tell them, this is what that means now for your immigration options, it can be really emotional and really overwhelming for people. And I am never going to fault anybody if they break down in tears on a consult.
No.
That is totally fine. I get it. I'm happy to be there when people are upset. And I guess it's interesting. I had a consult yesterday and somebody said, well, I thought you were going to just tell me what I wanted to hear and take my money. And I said, nope, I am not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what I honestly think about your immigration situation. And it's not because I want to take your money. I want you to know what's going on. Honest to goodness, here's what's going to happen. And I don't think you should try filing this application because I don't think it has a good chance of success.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
that's
the
kind
one
of been
thing
going
people
on.
can. Yeah, that's the one thing that I sure hope people get from Alicia and I and Igor and our firm is that we're going to do the very, very best we can to give you the information that you need, the information you need to hear so that you can make good decisions. And, I'm happy that in many instances, we do have pathways forward. We are able to help people. I think just yesterday I've got, 2 or 3 new judicial reviews we're going to do because I just don't think the refusals the officer, rendered were reasonable. And so it's really nice to have those tools in the toolbox when our clients really have no other options. And then there's this refusal, which really, I think we could challenge. We're going to do that for you. So I do, Alicia, want to bring up a very awesome starting point here. And Let's start off with this from Nash. Nash has been a very, very frequent follower and watcher of the channel. And so cool. Nash puts out a super chat, says, I've been nominated through the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program via the EE stream. So yes, the PNPs are alive, you guys. Yes, it's happening at kind of a trickle, but maybe, our premier in Alberta, it seemed like she had a positive discussion with our new Prime Minister, Mr. Carney. And the hope is that they're going to return the nominations that they had reduced last year, that they will hopefully return those so that there are more people in each province that have pathways through the various PNPs that they may not otherwise through express entry. So Nash, we're so happy for you. Nash says it's been a long journey from last year's race to file to expression of interest. That's right. Alberta had some tough kind of choices they made that created some unintended consequences. And now with the expression of interest system, there's, I think, over 33,000, I think I last looked, in the expression of interest pool for Alberta. So congratulations, Nash. Now eagerly awaiting my ITA. Thanks for all you do. Your info has been super helpful. So we'll give you some applause there, Nash. Thanks so much for sharing that. That's the good news. The good news that we're excited to hear. Now, for some of you, before we went live, you may have posted comments in the chat. And so the first comment, I see there's one from Victor and one from DV who asked some good questions. Could you please repost those? Because the first one we have on my list is actually Superman's comment. And Superman says, boy, we've got everybody. Batman, Spider-Man, Superman. Hi, Mark and Alicia. Would you mind explaining a bit how physical presence is calculated for citizenship, especially for this? I leave Canada today, spend a night outside of Canada, and come back tomorrow. So, Alicia, is that considered any days outside of Canada?
No, it's actually as long as you've spent time every single day. So you've spent a few hours. Now, you do have to be a bit careful about universal coordinated time. So immigration uses UTC time. So just make sure that if you are going to do a quick trip there and back, that you've spent at least an hour or a couple hours inside Canada. Look at your UTC time calculator converter, and then make sure that you've come back into Canada before it's hit a 24-hour period and you're back in for the next day. So as long as you are physically present inside Canada for a part of any day, and you can prove that based on your exit and entrance history, then technically you've not had a day outside of Canada.
All right, next question. This one is from DV. So, hi, Mark and Alicia. I'm coming to Canada as an American and working remotely for a US company. Do I need a visa to do this? So,
DV, maybe we'll back up and we'll go over the ground rules for this. So Mark and I are here to give immigration information. And when it comes to requiring immigration advice, this is where we for sure want you to book a consult. We want you to talk to us a little bit more about what are your circumstances? What's the relationship between the Canadian and the American company? Are you doing anything that could be considered entering the Canadian labor market? Because that is the big ticket question. Because if there's anything that you're doing that is displacing a job for a Canadian, you're getting paid, you're getting commission or wages or remuneration of some sort, that you're actually doing the work that a Canadian would do for Canadian customers for this US company, that would normally be considered working in Canada and normally requires a work permit.
All right, another super chat we have here from ACNCA. Which DLI number should be used in express entry, the old or the new one? The DLI number changed after the policy on curriculum licensing arrangements was shut down and after that they finished their program. So in this case, AC, I would put the new DLI number down to start with. Then in a letter of explanation, I would then indicate that my studies were under the old DLI number, but it is now changed. Now the question is, I don't know the impact of the change really, and this number change and what that would mean for your previous education. So that's something that we would definitely need to canvass through a consultation, because I don't know the impact of them no longer granting credit for the old DLI number. And if institutions can just change the number, like what does that mean practically for claiming that study in Canada? So that's something we'd need to look in. But at this stage, you're asking, well, which number should I use? I would use the new DLI number, but then I would provide a letter of explanation, because I wouldn't want an officer, if you are fully entitled to claiming that study history in Canada, I wouldn't want an officer looking at the old DLI number and then just refusing because it's not on the list, and then saying you don't get any points. But at the same time, you have to be careful not to misrepresent. And so we need a little bit more information. But Alicia, do you have anything to add on that one?
Yeah, and just be careful, because with the changes with postgrad work permit eligibility, it's really important to go and make sure that your program is still PGWP eligible if that's what you're trying to apply for. I'm not sure if you're trying to apply for a postgrad work permit or if you're looking at some other sort of permanent residence application, but take a look at the new changes to PGWP eligibility in terms of what kind of program you completed and what's required when you're doing that PGWP application, as well as that letter of explanation, just saying, look, here's what I did when I was initially in this program, here's what the program changed to. Make sure that you can still claim whatever points. If you are looking at express entry, make sure you can claim whatever points you think you can in terms of that Canadian education period.
All right. Cyber Ninja says, Dear Mark and Alicia, someone said there are already 852,700, well, that's pretty exact, permanent residency applications under processing, enough to meet the targets for the next 2 years. Is this true? Well, you have to understand that those numbers, there may be that many in the queue, but the annual levels plans dictate which applications are going to get processed each year. We know that some applications like self-employed, H&C, other permanent resident categories are experiencing astronomically high processing. Even spousal sponsorships are indicated to be over 2 years in some instances for in Canada applications. And so although there may be a big queue of overall permanent resident applications, economically, if you file an express entry application, they're not just going to stop processing express entry. They will prioritize the ones where they have expectations of turning these around quickly within the 6-month period originally allotted for it. And so I don't see that being a significant issue, although we've seen the processing times climb. The PR portal, for instance, applications through that, processing times have all climbed. And that is a product of the volume of applications in the queue. And they are truly only going to process the numbers or the amounts that they've indicated in the levels plans. Otherwise, why would you create a levels plan if you were just going to blow past it in processing? So we will see processing times increase. Thoughts, Alicia? Anything else to add on that one?
Yeah, we know that some of those applications are going to sit for a long time, just like Mark said. And in addition to the long processing times would be like parents and grandparents sponsorships, right? Where they're only letting in a few and it's going to take a number of years of processing. Same thing, even if you have to do a paper-based express entry, or sorry, non-express entry. So a paper-based application for permanent residents, like some of the PNP programs that are not express entry linked. Those ones are looking at much longer processing times as well. So this is why. So immigration manages its file inventory to make sure that it's still going to be meeting those levels plan targets.
Okay. All right, next one. This one is from Joe Bayed. Good morning, Mark and Alicia. Please discuss something about the education categories, possibly CRS score for the future draws. So that's a good lead in to our most recent round of invitations, which happened 5 days ago. May 2nd, 2025, we had a healthcare and social service occupation. And then that was version 2. So that was May 2nd. And then previous to that, and we had some clients, that's a full ministerial, sorry. Previous to that, we had our very, very first education occupation draw on May the 1st, the day before. So there were 1,000 invitations issued and the low score was 479. We have a client who was drawn under that particular category. And I'll be honest, Alicia, I was quite surprised at this category to start with. the decision that they made to create it. I'm assuming that there is a lot more pressure in the school system, especially in Ontario, and a lack of teachers to be able to handle the higher volumes of families that have moved to Ontario, both with the parents as study on study permits or work permits, or even transitioning to PR. I know here in Alberta that my daughter just voted on whether or not to accept the most recently negotiated collective agreement for Alberta. It's trying to stave off strikes, at least in our school division down here in Lethbridge. And so we'll see how it plays out. But she's still on temp contracts and filling in for medical leaves, and she's still looking for her first full-time job. And so in Alberta, I wouldn't say there's a huge shortage of teachers, but there obviously must be in other jurisdictions. As far as the points, so we see 1,000 here, and there's, the low CRS score was 479. We can't help but pop it up here, Alicia. We'll just bring this one right on over to you here, and yeah, we'll give a big rub there. What do you think? What do you think for this question here,
Yeah.
in terms of possible CRS scores for
Yeah.
Joliet?
And I think the 479 is relatively, like, that's kind of lower than I would have expected. And I think the reason is because this is one of the first draws that we're seeing post removal of those 50 points, right? So all we've seen so far since they took away the 50 points for arranged employment have been PNP draws. So this is the first one where we see kind of what's the effect on the pool of what's happening with the removal of the arranged employment points. So 479, it's decently high, right? If you don't
Yeah.
have arranged employment points, you've got to have really strong human capital points, really strong language points, maybe some Canadian education, maybe some French. So they did a relatively large draw. If we look at that education draw in relation to the healthcare draw, they only took 500 people when they did the healthcare draw. And so you can see that when you only take 500 people under healthcare, the CRS minimum on the most recent draw on May 2nd was 510. So maybe a lot of those healthcare professionals probably have a master's degree, so they might be getting more points for education. But what we're looking at is probably around that same amount. So I would say high 400s would be a good guess if they do another education draw. My worry is that because it's pretty niche, because education is probably not going to get a large overall allocation in terms of the express entry targeted draws. My thought is probably there won't be another education draw for at least a few months. So I would say that they're probably going to cycle through, they just did healthcare, they might cycle through maybe trades or one of the other targeted occupations before they may consider coming back to that education. So it's probably going to stay around, I'd say, that 475-ish mark, because more people will pile in and it's going to take some time before they do another draw. That's just my guess from rubbing the crystal ball.
All right. Okay. So let's see. I'm just flipping through here. One of the questions that was asked, I was just flipping through here trying to see this. I think probably is the answer. We don't do a lot of self-employed, you guys. So I'm going to flip back here and I'll just show you. So Omer asks, what's the minimum investment required for family immigration through self-employment in Canada? So there are categories. So we have a category that's self-employed PR, which is right now definitely over. It's been overutilized to the point where immigration has really slowed down processing. And so you can see, is there a net worth requirement for the self-employed program? So there is no regulated minimum net worth. And that's probably why Omar is asking that question. But you still need to satisfy the officer that you have enough money to settle in Canada and finance the work. And this is probably why, because on the finance part of the self-employed program, you have to show not only that you can kind of, come and settle, but that your self-employment has got a plan in place that's going to support you and your family and actually create a job for you so that you can take care of your own finances. So it's not just like a regular temporary foreign worker through the temporary foreign worker program who you need to be here long enough until you can get that job that starts paying you. This one is all about demonstrating the ability to support yourself through your own self-employed work experience, which is often some, things like if you're a musician or an artist, or, you've got basically a background where you are going to be coming over and creating your own income through your own business, your own self-employed kind of experience. So that's, I think that's probably what's being asked here by Omer. But I don't know. Otherwise, you're talking about through self-employment in Canada. We also know that if you have self-employed work experience outside, you can claim that for the purposes of the temporary foreign worker program. For the federal skilled worker program through express entry. But yeah, there's no real restrictions. But in terms of minimum investment required, I think probably they're referring to self-employed, I think. All right. Okay. Akash says, good morning. How long the permit have to be valid to apply expression of interest? Recently, I didn't receive an invitation, even though my score was higher than the cutoff. I was told I had less than a year permit. Is it true? Don't know. I think maybe he's talking about 1 year of work experience, the minimum.
Well, the way that I interpret this question, Akash, and maybe I'm not correct, but I'm assuming you're talking about the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program, EOI. There's lots of different PNPs that have expression of interest systems, but for Alberta specifically, we have switched. So one of the commentators were saying that, they actually had to race to put in that expression of interest. Alberta then changed to, instead of having to race, it's just kind of they open up and they do a draw based on who's on the EOI. For Alberta specifically, one of the factors that they look at and consider is how long your current work permit is going to be valid. And so you have less of a chance of getting an Alberta expression of interest for you to submit your full application to them if you have a work permit that's going to be expiring and if you have an express entry profile that's going to be expiring in less than 5 months. So it could be that because your work permit is about to expire, or maybe because your express entry profile is about to expire, if you were looking at an express entry linked application, that is a factor that Alberta considers when they are trying to decide who to nominate, because it takes a long time. And so once you have that EOI in the Alberta system, then they still have to decide, all right, we're going to do a draw. They can kind of pull different levers. They can pick and choose between different categories. So even if you have like a rural renewal community designation letter, you can get points for that under the EOI, but they might actually draw you under AOS. That's what happened to one of my clients recently. And then when they draw you under AOS, you just have to prepare an application under AOS. Even though it's not express entry linked, you're going to have to do a PR portal application, and that's going to take a really long time. So they want everybody to have work permits that are going to be valid for hopefully at least 6 months, so that you have time to submit an application, get an acknowledgement of receipt back, and then you can think about what your bridging work permit options are. Be careful, because there's a bunch of differences between a bridging open work permit and a bridging closed employer-specific work permit. Take a look at the article that I wrote about bridging open versus bridging closed work permits.
And just a little reminder for everyone, if you go to our website, go to blogs, you can easily search through the various blogs that we have, and there are a ton. The last one we did was tied to our with express entry, and Alicia and we did a podcast on this topic as well, so we encourage you to go take a look at that. But yeah, there's no shortage of blog posts on a whole wide variety of topics, so we encourage you to go check that out. Okay, Usman asks this question, which, every once in a while I get these, Alicia. And he says, I'm a master mariner, ship captain, age 51, currently working in the UAE. In which province can I facilitate my family immigration with this job field? So normally I don't put this up because it's really one of these. And it really comes down to being able to assess all of your background, Usman, and then looking to see if there's a program that fits with what you have done in your work experience. Now, ship captain, that's pretty cool. 51 years old. We can look at this, currently working in the UAE. So we don't know what your actual nationality is, but currently working in the UAE. And then in which province can I facilitate my immigration with this job field? Well, like I said, that's something that we would probably need to do in a consultation to assess exactly where you're at. You are going to have some challenges through express entry for sure. And if you're looking to immigrate directly to Canada, there are some, it's going to be a little bit of a steep hill for you to climb because of how competitive it is right now. But at this stage, anyways, we recommend that you book a consult and we can kind of go through it and at least give you an idea of, what the options may be and the likelihood of having success. It really has become a lot more difficult right now. Definitely a lot more difficult. Okay, Alicia loves answering these questions. So this one's from Satya Siba. What will happen if a person leaves Canada between the OINP, ITA, and nomination due to work permit expiry? So, basically, I think what's happening is so they've got the nomination, but they haven't yet gotten their ITA. So what's your thoughts, Alicia?
Yeah, so again, these are questions where we will need to have a consult because in general, it is not a good thing. So what I can say is generally many of the programs, and it really depends on which stream you are applying under, but many of the programs require you to be actively living and working in the province. Often you have to have an employer support the application. So first question is it employer supported application or is it not? Are you now going to miss your minimum eligibility criteria if you have to leave because your work permit expires? And will that then basically tank your application? So that's one big question is what category did you apply under and are you still meeting minimum eligibility requirements for it? Of course you have to comply with the law, right? If you're no longer eligible to remain in Canada, you will have to leave, but it might mean that it's going to jeopardize your ability to try to pursue that OINP and your PR application. So it's really tough. This is where looking at those possible bridging work permit options is super important. But it's really hard for people if you're running out of time on the work permit and you can't actually get that PR application with your acknowledgement of receipt filed. It doesn't leave very many options for people.
Got this comment from Anthony George. He says, "Hi, Mark. I'm a fan of your Express Entry Accelerator course. It is awesome. And with the help of that, I submitted my application. Just received Portal 1 request, and I'm in India on a trip." Okay. So this follow-up says, "I'll be back after a month. Can I request IRCC to send Portal 2 only after a month? What if they send Portal 2 before I travel to Canada?" So Anthony, this is really one of these because we need to understand a little bit more information about your situation in order to properly respond to that. If there's a short period of time that you're away, like on a vacation or something, and you come back to Canada right away, then usually there isn't too much of an issue continuing forward with the portal. But if you're going to be outside for a prolonged period of time, beyond the time period you have to respond, then that becomes more problematic. So we'd encourage you to book a consult so that you can, kind of sort out a best strategy for moving forward. But you're so close, Anthony. You definitely want to make sure you get this right.
And in general, I know there was a little bit of conversation on the listserv about this. So Mark and I are part of a national immigration listserv. So lawyers across the country kind of share what's going on with interesting files. And this is for sure a concern that if you are outside of Canada, when you actually get that landing and you're landed by accident outside of Canada, that can really mess up your landing process. And so you will want to avoid that. You will want to make sure that you are back inside Canada if you filed an inside Canada application by the time that they actually process your e-COPR.
Okay, next question here is from Marco. He says, "Hi, if someone has withdrew an application in the OINP because they want to go with Express Entry CEC, does he have to mention anywhere in the Express Entry application like statutory questions? Thanks." That's a great question. And so if we slide over here, this is the Express Entry Accelerator here. And this is a good little tool for me because I have the ability to slide in here. And we're going to go not to module 1, but we're going to go all the way to module 4, which is the EAPR lessons. And then in here for the principal applicant, we're going to go to the personal history section here. And then I just want to see if I can pull it up. So bear with me. I'm going to just skip a little bit through. Skip. So I'm just going to jump to the statutory information questions. Let's see here. Okay, let's stop this. Okay. So it says here, this question, I know it's really tiny. You guys can't quite see it. I wonder if I can make it bigger. Oh, I don't know. Yeah, that's better. Okay. Has this person been refused refugee status or an immigrant or permanent resident visa, including a certificate, the CSQ, de Sélection de Québec, or application to the provincial nominee program, or visitor or temporary resident visa to Canada or any other country? So you can see it's talking specifically about refusals. And then below it, which is kind of a little bit smaller, you can barely see it on the screen, it says, have blank ever been refused a visa or permit, denied entry, or order to leave Canada or any other country? So technically speaking, if we are, if we're kind of working through this here, let's just, I guess I just closed it. Let's shift back here. Technically speaking, if you've requested to have the application withdrawn, it's not a refusal. And that would be the only circumstance really within the context of an express entry application where you'd need to identify an application to a various PNP. So I think in your situation, once again, I'm going to ring the bell here because, you know, you want to make sure that you get this right. And we want to make sure that we don't have any of your facts misconstrued and then give you, something, an idea about, what you need to do specifically without, just making a mistake because we don't have all the facts. And so we're very careful with that. But Alicia, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, the other thing, Marco, is just remember that one of the first questions it asks you when you're starting your profile is, have you ever applied to immigration before? And so you'd say yes, right? Have you ever made a permanent residence application to immigration before? Yeah, I have. Even if it's an OINP, I would say yes to that question. And then it's going to ask you, was it an express entry application? And then if it was an express entry application, you'd have to put your express entry profile number. But if it was not an express entry application and you did apply to OINP and you're withdrawing it, even if the statutory declaration question is no, maybe, it's not technically refused, I would still recommend you do a whole little LOE about this, a letter of explanation, and just say, look, I applied, I withdrew, because you don't actually know sometimes what happened on the OINP end in how they process that file. So what did they do with that file after you withdrew it? And I've literally had a client who tried to withdraw an application. It took them a year. They said, hey, you don't meet the program eligibility requirements. And he said, yeah, I tried to withdraw it a year ago. And they were only getting around to even looking at that a year later. And so they were going to refuse the file a year later, even though he tried to withdraw it a year before. So I would put all of this in an LOE if it were me.
Yes. All right, we've got a few little shout outs we'll add here. So Marlon says hi from Saddletown. Alicia, any idea where Saddletown might be from?
I think it's in Calgary. It's terrible.
Indeed.
I know I have to check.
Yeah, the Saddle Dome, which it's not going to be long, is it? How's construction coming on the new arena in Calgary?
Yeah, there's lots going on around that area. I've got nieces who are in Young Canadians who perform at the Stampede all the time, so back and forth down there, and there's always construction down there, so they are working on things.
Yep. Okay, one also says hi, Mark and Alicia. G2D2 is sending out a shout out from Tunisia. Great to have you connecting in. Okay, Marlon says my tracker is showing all steps are complete and an eCoper number, but did not receive the portal emails yet. What's your experience from there? What to expect? Marlon, as you've seen from other people that have connected in with us here, the portal right now, the eCoper portal, is taking a very long time. So lots of people are just like you. They see that eCoper number there. They assume, hey, everything is done, but then they just don't get the email. Well, like I said, we've seen 2 months or longer sometimes, people waiting for those. One positive, Marlon, is that you, my friend, are in the final stretch. And yes, it's frustrating not to just get it officially finalized and completed. But when you think of all of the people whose work permits are expiring, who are having to leave and don't have this option, oh boy, you're in pretty good shape. So yes, we don't have an exact idea. It's hard. I don't know why things are hung up, either than maybe, they've got different allocations for officers to focus on different types of applications, and there just are not a lot that are doing the portal setup for eCopers. Yeah, I don't know, because it's maybe a less of a priority. All right. Okay, VK says, hey, Mark and Alicia, do you know if it is possible to travel after the second PR approval email, but no COPR yet? Thinking of different ways, maybe returning to Canada via the US with a rented car. So once again, we're going to ring this because this is a very volatile process. And it's one that you have to take very, very careful and be very cautious. We tend to tell you not to leave. That's our response. But Alicia, do you have, what are your thoughts on this?
Ugh. So, like I was referring to before, there have been some emails about other people who've had clients who tried to leave, and then for whatever reason weren't back in Canada at the time their e-COPR was signed.
Mm-hmm.
And so immigration's going to go ahead and sign that document. And the problem is, if you are not physically in Canada and you try to come back, the officer is going to take a look at that and say, wait a minute, you weren't physically in Canada when your e-COPR was signed. It was signed in error. And now you've got to try to figure out what to do about that. And so that's not a situation that you want to have.
Okay, we've got a few other comments here I want to bring up. Let's see here. Got so many. Okay. Oh, I'll pull up Omar's here. This is some positive news. Okay. So Omar says, just passing to say that after 2 long years on the comprehensive security screening, I'm finally a permanent resident. Thanks for all the info and advice. Omar, we are so happy for you. And this is a situation where, an application is just stuck in those lengthy processing times. And, the security screening for some countries, because of the high volumes, they're basically doing heightened security screening for everybody from those countries. It obviously causes delays in the finalization of PR. So we're really, really happy for you, Omar. So congratulations on that. All right, John Snow. What are the best documents to prove cash salary, Mark? How about you, Alicia? If you got a client who says, I was paid in cash, what are the ideas? And I'm going to point something out here, you guys. Let's see what I've got here. Oh, I thought I had one right here. Here I am. Okay. So one thing I want to point out is I just had a consult just the other day, and these clients got their application refused. The reason they got their application refused was for 2 reasons. And they're clients now, but when they got the refusal, they'd filed their own application. And so what happened was they had failed to indicate the work history in their original study permit. Sound familiar? Lots of people are getting their applications rejected because of that. So they failed to disclose, and it was an innocent oversight because the one applicant was actually a dependent spouse in their other spouse's study permit application when they came to Canada. And sometimes even on those forms, there's limited spaces to describe everything that you've done. Well, at any rate, the work history, they didn't indicate it on the study permit application. And really, it was the spousal open work permit application. And then later, in subsequent work permit extension applications, they did disclose it in 2 separate times. But they got a refusal back from IRCC saying, we're not going to accept this. And were they paid in cash? Actually, these clients weren't paid in cash. On top of it, they had a reference letter, but they did not provide any other supporting documents. So just the reference letter, no pay slips or pay stubs, no tax filing documents or anything like that. And an officer took a critical view of why they didn't disclose that prior work history and refused it. Now we're going to judicially review this, but you have to be so careful when you are claiming work history and do not assume anything. So one thing I can tell you right off the bat is that you're absolutely going to have a perfected reference letter. And I would hope that you would have had pay slips or pay stubs concurrently with when the cash payments were made. Now, ideally, it's great if you have a bank statement showing the wages being deposited into that bank statement. But in the circumstances where you're being paid cash, those pay slips and pay stubs are really, really important, as well as any tax filings that you've made confirming your employment income for that tax year. So I don't know, Alicia, if you have anything else to add to this situation, but it's one where a lot of people are paid in cash overseas.
Mm-hmm. And I've had a couple of cases where we had to do proof of self-employed income, and it takes a lot more work because you as the applicant have the onus to prove to immigration that whatever you're claiming for points is backed up with evidence. And if you're claiming that it was paid work and it was cash, then you've got to work a little bit harder to try to show that you actually did those hours and it was high skilled work and you actually were paid. And so there are a number of things that you can do. Sometimes you can go back to your client or your whoever you've invoiced and get them to attest to say, yep, this was who I hired, this is the scope of work that they did, I paid them this amount based on my records, and they can sign off on that. Sometimes you can show bank account balances, but if you didn't put the money in that bank account, that's going to be difficult. So you have to kind of line that up with other evidence as well. Sometimes, hopefully, you've been filing taxes, but if you're paid in cash, you may not have been filing taxes. So you might not have those documents either. So you're going to have to work harder to try to prove what you're claiming.
You bet. And then we have some nice comments here, Alicia. Dana says, Alicia, Mark, and Igor, I can truly sense this genuine intention to help your clients. Thanks for your empathy. Thank you, Dana. And I hope that you guys feel that when we're doing these live streams and you know when you're working with us. And I think our when we look at the results, I guess, of our the Google reviews that we have on our website, and I'll just slide over here quickly. There it is. In here, you can see we actually have our Google reviews here. Looks like we've got about 220 now. This, you know, these reviews really mean a lot to us because at the end of the day, you know, these are real clients who've worked with us. Oh, look at that. There's Alicia. That's awesome. That's great. So Alicia here, and I think we also have another comment right here, Alicia. There you go. So she says, you really are involved to solve people problems, not just taking the money with easy processes. Thank you for your service to the community. So thank you. There's a double whammy there from Alicia on two fronts. So thank you, you guys. This really means a lot to Alicia and I and Igor. You know, we really do try to work hard and we try to make a difference in people's lives. And there's nothing more satisfying to us than when clients express appreciation for the work that we do. And we wouldn't be doing what we are doing right now if it wasn't for you. Even having you join the live stream and asking questions, this is what allows us to share our knowledge and our experience and to really try to benefit people in ways that they might not be otherwise be able to benefit. So thank you for those very, very kind comments. All right, Akash says, good morning. How long the permit have to be valid to apply expression of interest? Recently, I didn't receive invitation even though my score was higher than the cutoff. I was told I had less than a year permit. Is it true? So
we talked about this one, Mark. This
yeah,
was,
did we
I
cover
thought
that
it was
one?
AAIP. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Rosemary says, hi, Mark and Alicia, please can I combine 2 work experiences in the same knot code?
It depends. It depends if this is in Canada or outside Canada. So it depends if you've met your minimum eligibility, right, for whatever category. So the rule, Rosemary, is that if you are looking for federal skilled worker eligibility, it's got to be one knot code, it's got to be continuous work, right? So you've got to make sure that within the last 10 years, you can show continuous work in one knot code, at least 30 hours per week. You can combine work over a 2-year period to hit that 1 year overall. If you are looking for CEC, then you can combine different knot codes and you can also work different part-time jobs, but you still can't claim more than one full-time job in any given week. So right now I'm working with a client where it's pretty tricky because they were working at least 30 hours in Canada, but they were also working on an online job, right? And so you've got to be really careful how you claim that in your express entry profile and make sure you're still meeting minimum eligibility criteria for either FSW or CEC, or if you have an ITA, you've got to make sure that you meet minimum eligibility criteria for the category under which you were drawn.
I'll just pull up, Noel has been posting this a lot. I don't know. No, we just don't do this. So he says, what is the processing times for group of 5? I just don't know. No.
And Noel, yeah, because I saw, Noel, you've been on a couple times. Igor and I were doing the last couple lives for the last few weeks. And one thing that I will say is we know that immigration, so November 29th, 2024, they issued a notice saying they were pausing intake on any new group of 5 refugee sponsorship applications for until the end of the year, basically. And Group of five, like kudos to the people who are doing group of five sponsorships for refugees. And I don't know if most Canadians realize that. I think there's some rhetoric out there about
Yeah.
refugees using up Canadian funds, but Group of Five sponsorships are privately sponsored refugees. There are a few categories, community sponsors, Group of Five, where they're privately sponsored. So literally, this is Canadians out of the goodness of their hearts saying that they're going to get together and they are going to come up with the money, come up with a settlement plan, come up with the way to actually assist these refugee families in coming to Canada, and it's not costing the government money. This is literally private
Yeah.
citizens or sometimes church groups or charitable organizations who are banding together to make this happen for people. And immigration is continuing to process it. There was a news release on November 29th, 2024, saying that even though they're pausing new intake, the reason that they're pausing new intake is to try to deal with the backlog of applications.
Yeah.
And so it does say they're going to continue to process privately sponsored refugee applications already received in the queue. So it sounds like, Noel, that you already have that application in process, so that is good. For 2025, the processing target for PSRs are 23,000 people. So keep that in mind.
Well, yes, indeed. All right. Messi says, hi, when is the citizenship guide course coming out? That is a good question. So if we go back here to the Canadian Immigration Institute, this is something that Igor and I, oh my goodness, we are just so busy with everything that we're doing here. This is on the list. So this is supposed to be released. So I was talking with Igor just recently, and we are really close to having this one released. So yes, it's been coming soon for quite a while, you guys, but the expectation here is that we're going to get this one out relatively quickly, but there's no set timeline. So hang in there. Now, at the end of the day, we help many clients with their citizenship applications. I've just filed a couple just myself just this last couple of weeks. And so if there's anything that you need assistance with, Messi, in the interim, you can absolutely book a consult. We can go through everything. You can retain us. We can assist you. We're here to help. All right. Shirley says, hi, Mark and Alicia. Do you think Francophone mobility program will be extended? What do you think, Alicia?
Yeah. And this is something Igor and I talked about last time too, because people were worried because technically when you go on to the Mobilité Francophone, it says it's a pilot program. And so one of the things that they have said is that the last renewal of the pilot program was in 2023, I believe, and I think it was June or July, and then it's up for renewal in June or July of this year. And I think it will continue. It has continued. I think Igor had pulled it up and it originally was launched in 2016 or something like that. So it's been around for a number of years. What they may change or what they could change is what the NCLC level is, right? So for a long time, it was sitting at NCLC level 7, which is functional, pretty darn fluent French in all 4 scores, speaking, reading, listening, and writing. Then they reduced that. So I think it was June 15th, 2023, they reduced that to an NCLC level 5. So what could happen is that they could take a look at that and they could bump that back up if they think there are too many people applying for open work permits, or sorry, closed work permits that are employer sponsored under, but LMIA exempt under Mobilité Francophone. So that is the question. I think they will extend and renew it, but the big question mark is what's the NCLC level going to be?
Are they going to make any changes? So yeah, I agree. I think that there's, with what we've seen from the Liberals, even within the campaign, some of the campaign promises, our new prime minister had indicated that I think it was up to 12% or higher, 14, I can't remember, but they were looking to increase the annual levels plans of French speakers, Francophones outside of the province of Quebec, like overall numbers. And all of this fills in with that whole idea. Come over, if you speak French, come over, get a work permit, and then you can apply for permanent residence. So just don't live in the province of Quebec. So definitely, reality. Okay, George says, hey, Mark and Alicia, with the recent health and education draw, any speculation on trade draw cutoff and the number of invitations? So let's just take a quick gander here. So like we said, May 2nd, about 5 days ago, there were only 500 invitations issued. And the lowest score, you can see, with healthcare and social services, the lowest ranked candidate was still 510. So really quite high. And then if we go down to the other previous rounds, you can see there was just double the number of education, and then it pushed it down to 479. So as George asks here, if there is with the recent education, trades is still on the list. So Alicia, what do you think? What do you think the trades will be? What do you think?
Mhm. Well, this is all speculation, George. So trades, I think, is going to, based on that pool of applicants, because you don't have as many points for education. Most people are not going to have masters in the trades categories. You're probably going to have a slightly lower age range, so you'll have more points for that. I'm guessing it would be probably in the high 400s if they were to do a trades draw, and they might do a trades draw because Canada now is looking to start to build out housing, especially. So
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Vulcan, I love this, which happens to be my hometown for high school, Vulcan, Alberta. Yes, there is a Starship Enterprise there too, I might add. It says, hi guys, do you have any financial options for paying consults on 2 or 3 payments? So I'll give you a little bit of history, Vulcan. So right now, if you go to our website, you can very easily book a consultation with us. Click on speak to a lawyer, then you scroll down, and then you can choose one of us here. Oh, Igor's got himself. We got all of our nice little outfits on here. Recent pictures taken. So we'll go to Alicia's. You go here, you choose the day. You can see Alicia's got lots of consults for tomorrow. You can connect in. And when you connect in, the consult fee that we charge is $315 for basically a 25-minute consult. And the reason that we charge a consult and we charge that up front is because in my early days of practice, especially when I started doing more consults online, I didn't always charge up front. And so you can imagine if someone is booking a consult from some other foreign country outside of Canada, and well, even inside Canada, and then once the consult is done, then sending an invoice for that amount. In my early years of practice, my practice probably would have been, well, it would have really suffered financially if I had not made changes to then request paid consults in advance. Because unfortunately, not everybody is super eager to pay the invoice after the consult is already done. So with that, if we were to do payment options, well, the payments would need to come in before we actually did the consult. And it's just a method of just protecting our legal fees. And we hold those funds in trust. And then once the consult's done, then we render the invoice for the funds that you've prepaid. And that's how it's structured within the firm. So hope you can understand that. All right. Okay, next is Christina. She says, they say that it is harder to get a nomination in BC PNP than any other province. Why would they be saying that, Alicia?
yeah, so BC has made a number of changes. So we can, if you go to the BC PNP webpage, it does say that they are pausing many different types of categories, or they're not rolling out some of the new categories they had talked about rolling out. They are focusing basically on healthcare and their priority occupations and some of the other priority streams, like for rural, but often for healthcare. So these are the updates. They've basically had everything grinding to a halt in BC. They only have 4,000 nominations for the entire year for 2025 so far, and their volume and their intake inventory is so high that they don't need to take very many applications this year.
Yeah. And it really comes down to this announcement on January the 31st. And like we said before, we just talked about this briefly, but I'm just going to pull this up. Whoops, let's hear. Oh, I can do it. Annual. There it is. Levels plans 2025. There it is. So if we pull up the 2024, maybe that makes sense to do this. I think a lot of people are familiar with this now, but the reality is it's helpful to just refresh people's memories. So the immigration levels plans for 2024, our PNP nominees right here were at 110,000. And then for 2025, prior to the election, they were scheduled to go up to 117,000 for the provinces. And then for whatever variety of reasons, combination of factors, the Liberal government decided to change that. And so they removed many of the nominations for the provinces to the point where now, excuse me, if you look, now it's only 55,000. So they went from a projected of 117 down to 55,000 this year. And so, when we're talking about, like Alicia was talking here, when we're talking about the BC PNP slowing down or pausing, that's what resulted in many provinces just saying, look, we already have enough people in the queue to meet this target for this year. So we're going to pause till we figure out what the future holds. And my hope is that our new prime minister, and I'm assuming our minister is still the same minister, right? I think it's still Minister Bendayan here. If it still is, I think she is. Then my advocacy is, minister, return the nominations back to the levels that you had originally intended, or at least to a comparable or proportionate number based on the reduction that you had made down to 395,000 for this year. So I think, in my mind, I would love to see economic driven more by the provinces, economic immigration. And I mentioned that on the Borderlines podcast with Stephen and Deanna. That's what I would like to see, that the provinces actually had 75% of that allocation, and then the federal government maintained 25% for express entry. But, well, those are just my wishes, and unfortunately, I'm not the one making those calls. So too bad. I wish I was. Okay, we've got another super chat here. I don't think I covered Moyes. I worked 1 year casual, 6 months total at a company. If I go full-time in the same role and work 6 months, does that count as 1 year for express entry? Well, this is something we cover a lot in our express entry course. And one of the things always that we look at is the actual number of hours that you worked. And we don't see, Moy, from this, other than you indicating casual, if you were hitting the 15-hour-a-week threshold for part-time work. If you were hitting a 15-hour average week for that 1 year that you worked part-time, or in this case, you describe it as casual work, then you could theoretically, once you cross over that full year, you could then claim 6 months of full-time work experience. And then if we're talking about the Canadian Experience class here, you could bundle those two together to formulate the 1 full year. So, Alicia, anything to add to that?
Yeah, like one of the things, so even if you go to Express Entry and you go to the Federal Skilled Worker Program and you go to kind of minimum requirements and you take a look at what they require for years of work experience. So it does say at least 1 year continuous work, 1,560 hours, 30 hours per week. And then there's a little gray box and it says how to count your work hours. And so, yeah, if we keep scrolling down on this page, here it is. So you can meet this hour requirement a few different ways. So the easiest way, the cleanest way is 1 full-time job, 30 hours a week for the full 52 weeks. Good, you're golden, that's nice and clear. However, life is messy. So here's what we have as another option in bullet 2, equal amount in part-time work. So if you did work half-time, which we're saying 15 hours, if you're working less than 15 hours, it may not qualify as a half of a week. But if you were working 15 hours for at least 24 months, that would be 1 year. You can work as many part-time jobs as you need to work that requirement. If you're working full-time at more than one job, then, yeah, you can combine those 2 different jobs, but keep in mind you can't count more than 30 hours. You can't kind of bank hours and then say that I worked 40 hours, therefore I only have to work 20 the next week. It doesn't work that way. So it depends. And it also depends what your time period is, what your time horizon is. So if you worked part-time for that year, but it was more than 2 years ago, you probably now can't cobble together those next 6 months for the 1 year continuous if you're looking at an FSW requirement. So they say you can stretch it out over a 24-month period, but if it's longer than that, if it's too old, that that might not count either.
All right. Next on our list here is we're quickly running out of time. Let's go to, okay, I'm not sure. Did we cover Benoit here? He says, do you think the express entry pool is not updated yet? We have no evidence of where those 37,000 profiles went with job offer points. So I hadn't heard that, Alicia, but Benoit is trying to say that there were 37,000 people in the express entry pool with job offer points. And he's basically, Benoit is suggesting that if there isn't a big shift in the number of people in the 500 plus range down to a lower amount, then they must not be updating the actual data for who's currently in the pool. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Igor had some statistics or some numbers
Mm-hmm.
on, how many people, and I think the percentages thrown around were about 20% of the pool prior to the changes in March. Maybe that was the number of people that had job offer points. It's really hard to get that information unless you're doing like an access to information and privacy request to try to
Yeah.
figure out. But I think they have updated the pool. So if we take a look, we've now had those two draws. We've had the education draw, and now we've had the healthcare draw after the changes. And so everything should have been moved out of the system. All those arranged employment points should have been reduced. So it should be the current figures in the pool in terms of what the CRS score distribution is.
Mhm. Okay, we'll do a couple more here. Waleed asks kind of a complicated question, which I'll be honest, you just need to book a consult, Waleed. And for those who are wondering how you book a consult, there's a link in the description below that will take you right to our website where you can go right here and book a consultation with us. Okay, but back to Waleed's question. He says 514, it'll increase to 520 in July, expecting an ITA to come in the upcoming months. Recently, I won the DV lottery for U.S. green card. Should have an interview possibly in October, December. Is it a problem if I process both? So, Alicia, what are your thoughts on this? You have to be kind of delicate with this and careful.
Yeah. So one thing we'll lead is that we are Canadian immigration lawyers. We are not U.S.
Yeah.
Immigration attorneys. And so we can only give you advice about Canadian immigration law. The other thing is some countries allow or recognize dual citizenship and some countries do not. And so I don't know which country you are a citizen of, what your country of origin is, but you're going to have probably 3 citizenship possibilities or PR possibilities in the mix. And so this is where you've got citizenship, maybe you've got a PR green card possibility in the US, and maybe you're applying to Canada. The first thing I would say is please get really good cross-border tax advice because that is something that can really affect your financial decisions. So in terms of, sorry, in terms of what's happening with your options, you will want to double check and see how financially that can impact you.
Excellent. All right. We'll keep zipping along here. I'm going to do a couple shout outs here. So, Spider Man, the superheroes are back. Hi from Montreal. Hello, Spider Man. Good to see you. Betty says, what's happening with the CEC draws? Well, we're waiting just like you. And we anticipate at some point, okay, now that the world is kind of settled and we know, the government we're going to have for, up to 4 more years, that things will return down to, back to some level of normalcy. But understand, when the Liberals said they wanted to see essentially 1 million people leave Canada by 2025, this is how they do it. By not doing CEC rounds alone and focusing on the category or targeted draws, basically it's forcing people to time out on their work permits. And I'm not saying that that's why they're not doing CEC draws, but that sure is one of the consequences of not doing them. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's one element of just their strategy to reduce the number of temporary residents, the overall percentage down to 5% here by, I think, the end of 2027. So, all right. Hello to Hemi from Peterborough. Great to have you connecting in. Okay. And then we have Alicia Dio says, for Alberta workers, expression of interest under the, we've been through this one, haven't we, Alicia? For Alberta workers, expression of interest under the family connection in Alberta, is it okay to tick yes if the PR application of the parents is in progress and only acknowledgement of receipt was issued? So I think this is like trying to claim family when they're not quite PRs.
So, Alicia, we had a presentation from the Alberta PNP officers, and understand that when you do an expression of interest, It is up to you. This is something that you are attesting is the truth. And if they then do a notification of interest and they invite you to apply for your application, and they go back and they say, well, wait a minute, what did the question say in your expression of interest profile? And if it says, do you have family who are Canadian PRs? And you said yes, but they are not landed and they don't have their confirmation of permanent residence document signed off yet, that would not be accurate. And if you said that they had landing and they didn't, then immigration, so local AAIP officers can come back to you and say that's misrepresentation, right? You are trying to get an immigration benefit earlier than you should be eligible for. That expression of interest shouldn't be counting the points for you unless and until you can honestly answer the question. My family members are landed. They literally have their signed COPRs. If they have their signed COPRs, that is the moment, the magical moment you become a Canadian permanent resident. It's not the PR card, it's the actual signed confirmation of permanent residence document. So be super careful because you can get found to have misrepped. That is a 5-year bar. You would be inadmissible. All your family members would be inadmissible. So don't be cute about what your dates are and your landing for your parents.
Yeah. It is very interesting. I'm just going to pull up a couple of things. We've got a lot of really good questions that we're just not going to get to, guys. We're just about out of time here in 2 minutes. So I'm just going to pick a few quick ones here and we'll roll from there. This also covered in the course, we deal with this with our clients a lot, is paid time off spent abroad still counted as Canadian work experience, Alicia? And really it comes down to, is this considered a paid vacation or is it some other type of leave? Being paid is good, but what are your thoughts?
It's always risky, right? So you never want to have a situation where an immigration officer can say, I'm not sure that they are meeting their minimum eligibility requirements, and then the whole thing falls down like a house of cards. You also want to be able to prove everything you've claimed for your points. So let's say you do meet your minimum eligibility criteria. Well, what about your years of Canadian work experience? So if you are trying to hit that 1 or 2 year mark for Canadian work experience and you've already got your minimum eligibility under FSW, under all the definitions of Canadian work experience, it's work in Canada. And so if you are physically outside of Canada, there are some officer interpretations that say, you know what, vacation of 1 or 2 weeks, if it's paid vacation, is probably acceptable. However, I have had clients who are from a different country and they say, well, I wanted to go back and visit my family. And so 2 weeks were paid vacation weeks, but then I took like 4 weeks of personal leave in order to visit with my family, or something happened back home and I needed to attend to that. If that were my client, I would say then you stop your period of work. You split your claimed work experience. And as soon as you're outside Canada and you're taking personal leave, and that's now a number of weeks, then you can't count that as Canadian work experience if you're outside of the country, especially if you're not getting paid. So it does depend, and you want to be careful.
Yeah. Okay, whip through a few last ones here. Karaskoski says, hi, Mark and Alicia. Thanks for all the great work you do in the immigration community. You're very welcome. And then this is an interesting one. Any word on if Mark Miller would return as immigration minister? He was making a lot of sense in his changes. Well, I've never in the history of at least like a cabinet or anything, I've never seen a minister be brought back in as a minister. Usually once you're done, and then someone else takes over. So I can't speak to that one. I don't know. Eric says, is it necessary having a lawyer help you with your study permit? Alicia, is it necessary?
So Mark and I and Igor have seen so many cases, especially on study permits, where a foreign agent tells you, just do this, just say this, don't mention this on your study permit application. And understand that it is illegal for anyone who is not a lawyer, or in certain aspects a paralegal in certain provinces that are licensed, or a consultant that is licensed in Canada and has active registration. Only those 3 groups of people can provide legal advice for immigration for a fee. Anybody else is taking your money and breaking the law. So many of those people are going to tell you what you want to hear. They're going to have a whole system in place. There's quite a bit of fraud. Um, Sometimes they are working with other agents, and immigration is going to investigate. So be very, very, very careful about who you pay money to help you with your immigration application. Everything that you submit from a visitor visa application or a study permit application is going to be immortalized digitally. So everything that you submit in that application will come back to haunt you for the rest of your immigration history. And if it is not correct, if you've said something in your study permit application that maybe you don't even know because you gave somebody access to your profile or they set up an account, a ghost account without doing a use of representative, that is a very dangerous situation. So, is it necessary to hire an immigration lawyer? People don't, and we see nasty things that happen. Um, there are some good immigration consultants or other types of representatives who are authorized under the Act to provide you advice. So I would say hire somebody that you trust and that is legally authorized to provide you that work, who has experience, because the court has also said, you know what, if somebody takes you for a ride and gives you terrible advice and you rely on it, or you don't know what they submitted and you just gave them use of rep, it's on you. So they don't accept the fact that your representative was incompetent if they were a consultant. If it's a lawyer, then you have a whole bunch of protections, public protections, and that's why the Law Society of every province is there. Mark and I have to pay assurance and insurance dues every single year, thousands of dollars worth of them every single year, because if we were to tell somebody something that was negligent, then they can come back, they can sue us, they can go to the Law Society, and the Law Society, if they agree that what we did was negligent, will pay them back for the losses that they suffered. That only happens with lawyers. It does not happen with consultants. It does not happen with other professions. But it is because Mark and I and Igor are officers of the court. There's a Legal Professions Act, and we have an obligation to uphold the law, and it's a position of trust. It's a fiduciary position. And if we break the public's trust, then that is why there are assurance and insurance organizations to make the public whole again, so that the public can trust lawyers. So I would always pick a lawyer because there are protections in place, and there's a level of a standard there that if we do something that's negligent, then you have recourse.
Good answer. Okay. Wow. The questions just keep coming in here. Pawan says, good morning, Mark and Alicia from Seattle. All your YouTube content has been amazing, and it's helped me to get my PR for Canada earlier this year. We'll give you some applause, Pawan. That's great. We'd like to see that. And then we have here, Princem says, if we only have a reference letter and experience letter for employment and no salary slip, will it be okay to claim points? Princem, sometimes you have to include what you have, but I can tell you, if I have any choice, I will 100% include pay slips or salary slips and any tax filing documents. So flat out, that's the only thing we do with our clients. That's how we teach. If you have any options for it, you absolutely want to get it. Alicia's got some friends visiting her. And when it comes to the compensation, I just had clients who just had their application rejected. Why? Because they only included a reference letter. Now, there were those other factors at play, but we just do not mess around with it. So if there's any options, we do it. And you're not going to go back and say, hey, employer, can you create pay slips now to represent what I was compensated for years ago? No. You definitely do not want to do that. These are pay slips that are contemporaneous with when you're actually paid. Anne, good morning to you, Anne. Great to have you here. And then Marco says, Mark, disappointed about the election. Much love. Well, you know what? I said this on Stephen Muirn's, where we're talking post-election. I am 100% going to give Prime Minister Carney and his new cabinet, whether it's Minister Bendayan here or whoever gets appointed, give them an opportunity to try to move forward and fix without being critical. I'm going to give them a chance to try to rectify and do what they can. But my job, just like anyone, is, if there are things that are not working well, I need to advocate on behalf of my clients. And so I will tell them if I think something they're doing is stupid, and I will point it out. Or if there's problems within the administration of the immigration department, it behooves me to bring it to the attention of them. And it seems like sometimes the only time real change occurs, or if something gets hung up or if there's problems is if it goes to the media, it's like public, the public opinion has large scale power to get things done. And, we've experienced that even within our firm when we've had clients that have really been treated harshly by immigration. Some of the adoption cases that we've been through, having to go, take it to the next step to just shine a light on what's happening. That's what we do. And so I'm willing to give the new government a shot at trying to make things better, and I'm hopeful that they will. But I'm also going to be holding them to task if I feel what they're doing is actually making things worse, not just for all of the immigrants, but for the country. So, all right, that's my thoughts on it. And then the last we'll wrap up with Sybil says hello from Bern, Switzerland. So good to see you, Sybil. Great to have you connecting in. All right. As always, guys, these little live streams that we do each week, I want to thank Alicia so much for devoting time. And, she answers the lion's share of the questions when we're doing this, and I kind of moderate. Next week, we're going to have a different format. And so in order for me to focus, as well as Alicia, on answering questions, we're going to have Igor come in and be a moderator for us. And so we're all three going to be a part of this. And I think it'll be really, really good. And just so that you guys can see how well we work together and that we are a complete team. And no matter who you hire, we share and we talk about everything. We work together. So really, when you hire us, you're getting 3 lawyers. And that's how we run our firm. We're very collegial. We're very collaborative. And our clients benefit from that. So those of you who are looking to go through Express Entry, absolutely book a consult. We'd love to work with you. We do have the Express Entry Accelerator that is all designed to walk you through step by step through the whole Express Entry process. And we have the visitor visa course that Igor created. So I recommend both of those. All the links are in the description below. And that is basically it for today, you guys. I think I'm gonna start off here with our I should say sign off with our little new little music here. Thanks so much, Alicia. Any parting words for everyone? Words of encouragement?
No, I do want to give some words of encouragement to people, especially because it's been tough this week. So hang in there, right? Even if you do have to go home, the work experience, the education that you had in Canada hopefully will serve you. And make sure you're still following the law so that you can come back in the future.
Yes.
Keep your options open.
Yeah, I agree. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Take care.